post UFC 276. It's time for the podcast. And well, let's just get the positives out of the way. The UFC again, an excellent card. A main event that topped it off in a little bit of a ho-hum way, but hey, we got a great performance by Alex Volkanovski. We got a lot of KOs. We had one, two. Okay, maybe only 2 KOs. For some reason I was thinking there was more, but we also got 3 submissions, and pretty much every fight had an interesting through point through it. Outside of maybe the main event, and I guess Munoz versus Uriah Hall was just kind of one-sided as all get up. There wasn't a ton there, if I'm being completely honest. But I mean, hell, we got Brian Barberena defeating Robbie Lawler in a great fight. And we got a fantastic showing by Alex Volkanovski, like I said. And to be honest, we had some things that shifted perception of fighters. And I'm always down for a fight that makes me think differently of a fighter in a good way. And I think we had that with Dricus du Plessis on this card. We're going to talk about that. And I think we had that with Barberena. Who was a fighter I was kind of really, really down on. And I think he has a new lease on life. I think the danger level and the excitement that I have of Jalen Turner has grown. Ian Gary looked fairly good. There was also some disappointment. Jessica Rose Clark losing to Julia Stoliarenko. We'll talk about that in more detail. Not a ton more detail because there wasn't much of that fight. But it is incredibly disappointing to see that. And let's talk very little bit about PFL, because I don't have a lot to talk about with PFL. And it's, in terms of the highlights, Kayla Harrison won again over Caitlin Young. Rory McDonald lost again, and we're kind of at that point where I've said this repetitively. I don't honestly like telling fighters to retire because you never know where they are. You never know if that's really a card that is on the table, that is playable with their financial situation, and frankly, their mental situation. But at this point with Rory McDonald, we are at the point where I'm not interested in seeing him fight. We've been at that for a while, but I think this fight was the absolute nail in the coffin on the matter. So there's that. Ray Cooper III did defeat Brett Cooper in the Battle of the Coopers. Larissa Pachenko also won, as did Olena Kolishnik, who I think is actually a pretty good fighter. For a long time, I thought the gimmick with her is that she's a very attractive female who cleans up exceedingly well, and the glamour shots are really nice. And there's always this thought that the sexy female fighter is how you sell it. But to be honest, I actually think that there's probably more to it. To be honest, that there is actually a fighter there. Which I didn't really fully appreciate because early on there seemed some just massive problems with her game, but she is getting legitimately better. How old is she? I actually do not know off the top of my head. 32. Okay. I was kind of hoping for late 20s that she would still have a major resurgence. 32 seems unlikely, but hey, she's still over delivered what I think anyone really thought she was going to be at the beginning. But what I really want to talk about here is the Kayla Harrison problem. And when I say that is that every time Kayla Harrison fights and wins, MMA Twitter and MMA social media is all about how it's a mismatch, how it's terrible, how these fights shouldn't even be happening in many ways. And the problem with Kayla Harrison is that she's a women's lightweight. That's a weight class that doesn't exist beyond Kayla Harrison. I'm very serious about this. Kayla Harrison is a fighter who has 2 interesting fights to me. Cyborg and Amanda Nunes, if she beats Pena and regains her mojo. Those are the 2 honest to God interesting fights for her. And in the meantime, she has to fight someone else just to make money. So I don't really understand what people who always get angry about that fight really want to see happen. Is your solution that she just doesn't fight anybody? Because It's not like PFL can go out there and sign a bunch of people and stack a 155 division to actually give Kayla Harrison challenges. It doesn't exist. The depth isn't there. Like women's featherweight, women's lightweight, which are the two weight classes where Harrison could conceivably compete, are absolute wastelands for talent. Like they make, I was having this conversation with somebody on Twitter that like women's bantamweight and men's heavyweight, like these are the absolute, these are like so scarce, shallow divisions that really have never been particularly deep. They look like a freaking ocean compared to where Kayla Harrison is fighting. So I don't really know what I don't really know what people expect PFL to do or want PFL to do, because I mean, like it or not, Harrison's their biggest homegrown star. Like they want her to fight. They're going to put on fights at her weight class, and there isn't anyone for her to fight. Like I'm not asking people to get like super excited, because I mean, I'm not. But the reaction every time she fights is like this weird, like, oh no, it's really actually just terrible, horrible mismatches. They just want her to keep winning. It's like, no, there's no one to beat her. There's truthfully no one to beat her. Anyways, that's all I really have to say about PFL. There wasn't anything like super awesome, super cool or whatever. They were fine. Like I enjoyed the Cooper fight for as long as it lasted, all 24 seconds of it. I enjoyed the Larissa Pachenko fight, but again, pretty short fight. There wasn't a classic that you need to go out of your way to see, but it's still fun stuff. Anyways, let's move on to the UFC. So once again, we're going to talk about the fights. We're going to talk about where the fighters go, and I don't really have anything really to say about the judging today. I think all the judges' scorecards are fairly defensible. Like I disagree with like a couple of them. Like they don't match my scoring, but they're totally understandable. Totally understandable. So I'm not really going to get into that all that much. Maybe a little bit with the Barbara Jessica I fight. And there wasn't really a ton of like controversial stuff to work with, but there was some controversial like fan reactions to talk about, and we're going to talk about them as well. But let's start off with the main event: Jared Cannonier versus Israel Adesanya, UFC middleweight championship. Adesanya putting it on the line. And the feeling coming into this fight is that Cannonier just really didn't ask enough questions of Izzy, or at least the most probative ones, to actually produce a winning effort. And that basically was the fight. Early on, Izzy did his typical like patient, counter-striking sort of game. Pretty much easily won the first round, won the second round, did his thing. Looked like he had it figured out, and I was kind of hoping the gas pedal would get pushed in the third round. That was, number one, it's where I called for a finish, but number two, it really felt like at the end, like midway through the second round, that he had really figured out everything Cannonier was trying to do. And that the openings and the patterns were there, and that he should really be able to finish the fight, do his thing. And then he didn't, because he probably lost the third round, lost on two judges' scorecards. I scored it for Cannonier. Won the fourth round. And then I honestly thought that you could even maybe make an argument that Cannonier won the fifth round. Not that it really matters. Because, of course, you're down 3-1. It doesn't matter if you win the fifth round by like a small margin. You still lost the fight. And no judge actually gave it to him. And I don't have a problem with that. Did get 150-45, 249-46s. Izzy retains the belt. I wish there was more to say about this, but like it was kind of disappointing on both ends. In the first four rounds, it was disappointing from Izzy's end because it really honestly felt like if he just stepped it up, he could get a finish. It's like similar to the Anderson Silva versus Demian Maia or Talis latest fight, where realistically speaking, maybe not the latest fight, because latest was like actively avoiding any kind of striking exchanges with Anderson, with the constant like flopping to his back and stuff. But like the Demian Maia fight was like a good example of this, where it's like, okay, you're worried about this one thing, and I get it, but you've neutralized it. You can turn it up now. And Izzy and Cannonier is kind of the same thing. You've figured out Cannonier's game. Cannonier was making some good adjustments, actually. I said this in the breakdown, actually. I think Cannonier is actually a pretty smart, adaptive fighter. To be honest, like the mental capacity is there, and the ability to see what he needs to do is there. I just think that I want to say he's a guy who got into MMA relatively late in life. Am I wrong on that? Because he's 38 years old. He started fighting in 2011. So that would be, yeah. So he got into MMA in his late 20s. I don't think he had a particularly deep combat sports background. So I think, like, frankly, he just doesn't necessarily have the deepest of skill set. Like, it's one thing to see what you need to do, and it's another thing to have drilled it to being second nature to actually technically implement the plan. And I think that's the disconnect with him. I think he tries new things, and he largely tries the right things to try to get into fights, but he just doesn't necessarily have the ability to implement it. And that was the case here. So it was disappointing to see Adesanya cruise to a 5-round decision, especially after he kind of did the same thing against Robert Whittaker. There's also the Yoel Romero fight that was fairly boring. There was the fact that he was kind of talking about wanting to do something in the cage that was kind of special, and he definitely failed to deliver that. And it's not that he failed to deliver that because Cannonier fought so well. He failed to deliver that because he never really got out of like second gear in the fight. So yeah, I'm negative on the fight. I still think he's the best middleweight in the world. We're gonna get the Alex Pereira fight next. Hopefully that instills a little bit of extra into him at that point. But like the problem with Pereira is that it could go two ways. It could go, this guy has knocked me out before, and I need to make that not happen. So that you end up, and there are two ways that can go. That could make him exceptionally passive and risk adverse. That could also make him creative and wanting to end the fight and not give Pereira time. Because one would think he thinks Pereira can actually impose some level of game on him in a way that Cannonier couldn't. So I don't know. I'm excited for the fight, but I'm also like dreading the fight. It's not the greatest place to be in, I think. But I mean, I can't say anything negative about Cannonier realistically. Like, he fought the fight that I thought he was going to fight, couldn't really find his way in, made some decent adjustments, but never really at any point seemed to be like taking the fight over, even if I did score a round for him. I would have liked to see more risks from him in the 5th round. You're down 3-1. You need to go for a finish. You're not going to win this on the judges' scorecard. So just surviving doesn't really work. And I kind of thought that he would, because like Cannonier does have sort of a non-standard human policy, or not policy, psychology. This has been seen in like various interactions with like fans and stuff when they suggest that he's not the best fighter. Like, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of intensity, and I thought that would lead to trying something in the 5th round. Probably ill-advised at any other point in the fight, but you've already lost on the cards. You might as well go for broke, and he didn't do that. So that I guess is the one thing I have about him. I think the unfortunate thing for him is he's like I said, he got into the sport a little bit too late. Like, he's 11 years into his career, and for most people that means late 20s, early 30s. He's in his late 30s. He's just not necessarily going to ever put together that toolbox that is that complete while his physicality holds up. And it's a bit of a limiting factor. But I mean, admittedly, he's still probably going to beat most people that you put in front of him. You know, super physical guy, super hard hitter, pretty hard to control and really take down with a wrestling-oriented game. And for next opponent, I would love to see him fight Sean Strickland, because as much as, like, you know, Alex Pereira knocking out Sean Strickland doesn't in any way mean that Cannonier can super easily, it's still something I would love to see, because I will probably never get bored of seeing Sean Strickland, Mr. I'm a psychopath, but I fight like a dull, formulaic pressure boxer, getting knocked out. That probably never will get old. And I've more or less talked about the Strickland Pereira fight just through the links to this fight. Obviously, one, I think the loser of that fight should fight the loser of this fight. And two, I think the winner of that fight is getting the next title shot. So obviously went through it. And 3, it wasn't a very long fight. It went a whopping 2 minutes and 36 seconds with Pereira getting the knockout. It kind of, I don't want to say it went the way I thought it would, because like I did actually think that the volume boxing of Strickland would hold up a little bit longer than this. Like I picked Pereira to win by knockout. We got the knockout, all that. But it did kind of happen at an accelerated rate that I didn't entirely foresee coming. But I am very happy about it because, again, don't like Sean Strickland. But on top of that, I really have never liked Sean Strickland's tendency to throw like this super lazy, super open, like front kick. And the fact that that is what got him caught by Pereira is actually incredibly rewarding, because I've been saying for a long time that it's a technique that he's using in a manner that should not work. It tends to either work because he has a range advantage over his opponent, or the opponent just, I don't know, isn't looking to counter it. I've always thought it was incredibly counterable, and it was good to see Pereira do that and flatline him off that. I'm happy about it. So rematch of kickboxing match in MMA. Get that done. Strickland versus Cannonier. Hopefully Cannonier knocks out Strickland. And yeah, I'm not really going to go super deep into the whole Strickland thing. It's just, I think it's an act. I really do. It always confuses me that like someone who is essentially claiming to have such poor self-control or such violent thoughts, such socially unacceptable thoughts, like wanting to kill somebody, thinking about prison rape. I would be a meth cook if it wasn't for MMA. To go out there and fight the way he does, it doesn't connect. It doesn't connect. If he went out there and fought like someone like Paul Harris, I'd actually think it was like Paul Harris, I believe, is a psychopath. I believe there are screws loose in his head. With Strickland, it's more like a Colby Covington thing, where I just think that it's an act, and to me that's actually even worse, because you're presenting the act as yourself. You're trying to play a wrestling heel with no actual with no understanding that is absolutely what you are. Anyways, and then the Volkanovski versus Holloway fight. Let's talk about that. Volkanovski, I wish I could say I told you so, but like I didn't think that Volkanovski had all of these answers for everything Holloway had done. Because I mean, if you look at the first 10 rounds of this trilogy, in a lot of ways, the rounds that were won by Holloway were actually the more definitive rounds. Volkanovski was kind of winning on the margins. I'm not in any way arguing that he lost the first 2 fights, because I scored both of them for him. Like that's not something I'm trying to bring up here. It's that what he was winning on was like very small, very constant, but answerable things that when Holloway got it right, he was able to get momentum rolling. And that never happened in this fight, honestly. Like any moment that Holloway had was almost instantly shut down to the point where he didn't win a round. I don't think he won a round on any card. Let me just verify that real quick. No, 50-45 across the board by Bell, D'Amato, and McCarthy. And not that, again, Sal D'Amato is one of the worst judges in MMA history. Like, he is a candidate for my Mount Rushmore of terrible, terrible judges. I don't necessarily know if he's like guaranteed a spot up there, because you got Adelaide Bird, you got Cecil Peoples. So like you got 2 people instantly that are just absolutely guaranteed there. And Chris Lee has quickly become the 3rd. So D'Amato is fighting for that 4th spot against the likes of Jeff Mullen and Jaron Villel and Douglas Crosby, who are also quite bad. Anyways, less about the judge. It's just, I don't even really know how to describe it. It's just like Volkanovski, when he came to the UFC, started instantly studying Max Holloway and breaking down every tendency he has and every sign and every physical gesture that would allow him to get inside, land the low kicks, land the body work, land the counter punches, just have everything in control to just neuter the danger that is Max Holloway, the second best featherweight in the world. And probably the only guy who's like not the best in his weight class in the UFC that deserves like top 10 pound for pound consideration. That's how good this guy is. And Max Holloway just went out there and took him apart. Normally when you have a rematch or a trilogy fight, you're looking for the fighter that is down in the series, that lost the previous fights, to come up with new things and be the X factor in the fight that makes the second or the third fight different than what had come before. And that did not happen here. My lord, this was a masterclass. It was truthfully great. It's a fight that I'm probably going to watch again and again and again. And not because it's like an all-time great fight. Just that it is an all-time great performance. It should have been the main event. It should have been the main event. And I said that before because I thought, 1, I think this was a bigger fight. 2, I thought there was a solid possibility that we would get something very similar to what we got with Izzy and Jared Cannonier. I really did think that. I didn't think these two could be boring. They weren't. It wasn't super competitive like I was hoping, but my lord, was it fascinating. What's next for these guys? Josh Emmett, I said probably is your next featherweight contender. Not that I think Emmett has anything for Volkanovski. I truly don't think so. But at the same time, that's the fight to make unless Yair Rodriguez goes out and like styles on Brian Ortega or something. Like that's the only other option. A lot of people are talking about like, Volkanovski go for champ status, go up to lightweight, win the belt there or whatever. I feel like the timing is wrong. Like I feel like lightweight is kind of in this weird like state of chaos because number one, it doesn't have a belt holder. Like we're treating Charles Oliveira as the champion, but the technical legal truth of the matter is he's not. And at the same time, it doesn't feel like Oliveira's really cleaned out the division. So it's kind of weird. And it's weird. It's also weird because like it does feel like there's a number of good near title contenders at 145 for Volkanovski to fight. There is the Josh Emmets, there is the Calvin Katers, the Yair Rodriguez, the three guys that I mentioned in the title picture. Basically, when I was breaking down the Emmett versus Kattar fight and how that was going to go for the title. And then you even have guys like Arnold Allen. You have guys like Giga Chikadze even, who would be like interesting title contenders. But like, do we believe any of them have an answer for Volkanovski? Because I'm pretty much at the point where like, I absolutely don't. So it's kind of a weird one. As for Holloway, you can put him in there with, if you don't do Volkanovski versus Emmett, you could do Holloway versus Emmett. That'd be fun. That'd be, I think, an interesting dynamic a little bit. And also a dynamic to see, like, because Emmett, I don't want to compare Emmett to Volkanovski terribly closely, but like their physicality is very simple. They're similar. They're both guys who are highly athletic, highly explosive, but very short. So like it's kind of giving Holloway a way less nuanced do-over that you could have fun with, and maybe see like, what does this mean? Because like I'm assuming that Volkanovski just did an amazing job. Could it be that Holloway, who's never had like the best camp in the world and has gone through the non-hard sparring idea, which to be clear, I actually support. I think that non-hard sparring is actually a really good idea because I think the amount of CTE being taken in gyms is actually terrible. But at a top end, does that present shortcomings and fallings? I don't know. The other option, of course, Holloway could go up to 155. I do think that like at some point he's gonna have to go up there at some point. Like he just has a really large frame that like as his metabolism slows down, There's probably going to be some extra weight put on at some point. That is the, reality of getting older. I said this is a fat guy. It probably will happen at some point, and there's probably a larger group of interesting fights at 155 for him than there is at 145, because like he's already fought Cater, he's already fought Yair Rodriguez, he's already fought Ortega. Sure, there's like I said, Josh Emmett, there's Arnold Allen, but I don't know. Maybe it's time to just move up a weight class and see what happens. So there's that. Then before that, we had the Brian Barberena versus Robbie Lawler. Well, before that, we had Pereira versus Strickland, but we already talked about that. Barberena versus Lawler. I do have to... So the commentary booth was pretty good all night. Realistically speaking. They've been better since they've been forced to take, like, judging lessons and stuff. A lot of the things that, like, I previously found exceedingly annoying has been reduced. It's been brought down. And for those who are like unaware, my problem was always like when the commentary booth just fully didn't understand what was happening in front of them, like from a scoring standpoint. Like you get this round where like, okay, fighter A is beating fighter B up on the feet. Nothing 10A, nothing super awesome, but like clearly has a margin in the volume, the quality, the cleanness of the shots, the power being landed, the visible damage, all of these things that would win you around, and then they would get taken down with like, I don't know, 45 seconds to a minute left in the round. They'd be talking like, oh, but does that takedown steal the round? And it's like, no. By the judging criteria, it doesn't. Absolutely doesn't. You got outstruck and you got a takedown. You better do something with that takedown. Very impressive if you think you're going to take the round. The seal the round with a takedown idea is like still in play, but like it's in play when you've already like kind of won the round and you're just kind of ending it on a like, okay, I've outboxed you for 4.5 minutes. I've landed more. I've landed cleaner. The damage there. You got a little swelling over your left eye. Clearly won this round. There's 30 seconds left. I don't think I could finish you in that 30 seconds. Let's just take it down and like eliminate the puncher's chance aspect of things. So, like, I will still use that terminology, seal the round, but you're not going to steal the round with a takedown based on the judging criteria anymore. And there would be, like, other things like that. They're not doing that as much, but this fight was, like, a little bit, because there was a point where Lawler in the first round had cut the cage off and had kind of cornered Barberena. And Barberena was still throwing a lot, but there was a lot of hand parries, a lot of slipping punches going on. Like a lot of not really landing stuff. If you watch the fight and like pad of paper, tick the strikes that land cleanly or whatever properly by Barberena, it's a lot less than what UFC Stats has. It's a lot less than what the commentary was kind of selling it as. So like that was kind of my one problem with the fight. And round one was really good for Lawler. He was putting on a really he won it on I think 2 cards. I don't even necessarily have a problem with Barberena winning the first round, for the record. Like the one judge who scored it for him, if you really just believe that their punches were relatively equal, Barberena did land more. It's just Barberena didn't land nearly. The delta wasn't as large as the commentary and the stats were making it out to be, in my opinion. A lot of that was getting parried. A lot of that was getting slipped. But Lawler was looking great. He had Barberena hurt. He had Barberena cornered. But he wasn't able to fully press down the gas pedal and get things going. And then in the second round, he got hurt and got finished. And Brian Barberena's career is a weird one, because I honestly thought he was kind of done for like a while there. If we go back to 2019, when he lost to Vicente Luque, I didn't think he was done at that point, but that fight started to kind of show maybe that the durability wasn't quite where it used to be. And then he lost to Randy Brown. I still wasn't done with it yet, but then he had the Anthony Ivy fight. Wasn't great. He had the loss to Jason Witt. I really thought he was kind of done. And the win over Darian Weeks didn't really fix that. And even the win over Matt Brown didn't really fix that. But this fight kind of does, because the big concern with Barberena was essentially that he was like, that he was getting old in fight years. He's not a particularly old fighter, even by fight standards, but the wars he had been in had taken a toll. Like the chin was kind of gone. Even the cardio, which had previously been amazing, looked a little bit weaker. But he came out here, he put up a incredibly high output, high volume performance, got the finish, was still hurt. So I do actually kind of question that the chin is like really entirely there. But like he might have like kind of developed into like an Eddie Alvarez point of the career where it's like, okay, you hurt me, but my instincts carry me through the hurt and I recover reasonably well. That seems like to be where he is right now. And he got the win, and it's a good feeling. I suppose at one point I have to ask the question of what point do I stop being interested in Robbie Lawler getting booked for fights? Like I've long ago given up on Robbie Lawler like making an elite run to the top of the division again, just because he seems so uninterested in wrestling when you force him to it. And if you play a outside striking game with like a lot of leg kicks and you keep the range or whatever, he also seems to get a little bit bored about that, like frustrated. Like it feels we've seen him answer those questions before, and it just seems like he doesn't want to anymore. So it kind of like put him in this whole idea of like he kind of exists outside the ladder, but he was still interesting to watch fight. How many finishes like this do we need before that like stops being the case? It's not there yet, but I do now have that question. For next fights, I think Barberena Warley Alves could be a really fun fight, and that's one to look at. But I think you can also give him kind of a bigger spot because, he's a guy that has kind of earned it. This is a guy who has shortened his lifespan for the UFC by putting on exciting wars, and he's not going to be boring. So you can put him in there with someone just to have a good action fight. And that's the beauty of him right now. As for Lawler, I penciled in Court McGee. I think it's a fun fight. I think it's an interesting enough fight. And yeah. And it feels safe-ish for both guys. Like two guys who are kind of very much at that point of like, I haven't entirely lost interest in seeing you fight, but we're getting to that point. And that feels like a good matchup for guys in that boat. Before that, we had Sean O'Malley and Pedro Munoz. And the fight itself, I don't have much to say about. It just seemed like Munoz came out with the idea that he was going to leg kick. He was going to kind of pressure, but it wasn't going to be a very persistent pressure. There wasn't going to be a ton behind the leg kicks to kind of really inflict damage and really get it going. And in O'Malley's case, it felt like that took him really by surprise. It didn't seem like he knew how to respond to that. And to be clear, I don't even think he was like, I scored the first round for Munoz off of the leg kicks just because O'Malley didn't land much. But the second round was kind of going O'Malley's favor. But like, it wasn't like the weird thing is that like the social media reaction is from the O'Malley fan base is like, oh man, O'Malley was like just about to put him out, man. Like, did you see that? Like, it was turning into a totally one-sided beating, man. I'm doing like, a terrible accent here, but like, what fight were they watching? Like, don't get me wrong. If you thought O'Malley was winning the fight, I have no objection. Munoz, like, we know judges don't score leg kicks probably as they were. O'Malley was doing a good job for a change of actually checking the leg kicks. It looks like he has actually advanced his defense in that regard and that he's made some new adjustments. And you could see that O'Malley probably has become a better fighter. So I'm going to be like, complimentary to him. But he didn't do anything to have Munoz hurt. He didn't have anything that was like threatening Munoz, really. And then he pokes him in the eye, and Munoz can't continue. And people are like, no, Munoz wanted a way out. Why? Why? This is Pedro Munoz we're talking about here. This is not a fighter that we haven't seen in exceptional adversarial circumstances and still think that he's winning. This isn't a guy that we haven't seen take an eye poke while taking an ass beating before and continue the fight. There was no ass beating going on here. There was a relatively minor. Hang on, let's pull up the UFC stats for this fight because they're not impressive. Okay, here we are. Significant strikes landed in round 1, 19-15. In round 2, 10-7. And you think that this guy wanted a way out. That Pedro Munoz taking 26 strikes, and to be honest, not very significant strikes, wanted a way out after eating 103 against Dominic Cruz, 114 against Jose Aldo, 65 against Jimmy Rivera, who's a pretty big hitter, 135 from Frankie Edgar, 174 from Aljamain Sterling, 76 from John Dodson, who's a pretty big hitter. Like, get out of here. Get out of here. That was the... I understand that like there's a fan base for Sean O'Malley that I just don't understand. Much in the same way that I never really understood the Conor McGregor fan base. And I don't really understand the Paddy Pimblett fan base. And like all of these things. Or the Sean Strickland's a bit of a different one where like I don't understand the other fan bases I just talked about, but like the Sean Strickland fan base actually actively scares me. Unless here's the thing, unless people have just come to the conclusion that Sean Strickland is an act, they're just kind of enjoying it like an episode of Breaking Bad. I guess that's possible. But I don't think it is. I don't think it is. But I don't get it. As for what they'll probably just rebook this fight, so I'm not gonna really like get into like emphasizing what these two should do after this, because it still feels like of like the top 10 fighters, Munoz is the most favorable matchup for O'Malley, and they do want to get him a win. And I've said this, it's not a problem. You want to build stars. You want to, like, we can't simultaneously complain about the UFC's lack of building of stars and then, critique when they're trying to do that. Like, this is matchmaking 101 for trying to make a star. We may not like who they've chosen, but they're trying to do it, and I would like to see it be done much more. But it's the safest like kind of top 10 fight that they've got on offer for O'Malley because of the height differences and Munoz being kind of foot slow, and nothing about the fight really changed my mind on that. Like Munoz was implementing leg kicks, sure, but that was kind of about it. So I don't know. They'll probably do it again, and I don't want to hear the nonsense. I've always said this. I don't enjoy the bullshit hot takes. And it's not like, okay, you have a theory that like is different, but it's like you have a theory that flies in the face of what happened in the fight and Pedro Munoz as a fighter, and it's just silly. That being said, I will say the people calling for O'Malley to have lost this fight by DQ also get out of here. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not necessarily against the idea of an unintentional foul ending a fight in a DQ. Like, I don't have a problem with that. But he had a marginal groin kick and then an eye poke. Like, on the scale of, like, things that should lead to DQs, we had more on this card that probably actually should be considered for a DQ than this. So there is that. And I also didn't enjoy O'Malley kind of celebrating. Like, he did the dribbling thing and the jump shot thing, the basketball stuff that he likes to do after he's won a fight. And he did that when the fight got waved off because of either assuming he didn't understand the rules and thought that he had won by doctor stoppage, that performance wasn't worth celebrating. And, he still did it. Not a fan. Probably never will be a fan. It doesn't matter because he's got fans, but not a fan. Below that on the card, this is what I didn't do matchmaking for because actually I don't know why. I think the lightweight rankings were missing. Jalen Turner in 45 seconds just dealt with Brad Riddle. I picked Riddle, and there's the round of applause because don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of what Jalen Turner can turn into. He's a guy with obvious physicality for the lightweight division, like destructive physicality, and a pretty a well nuanced, dangerous game. Like I'm a big fan, but I thought that he was still at kind of this point of like his athleticism and his physicality is more of an insulation for a lack of necessarily the deep end technical skills. And I still, to a degree, think that. Like, it's not like this fight, went out there and, he showed for, a round even that, he could kickbox with Riddle. But, there's definitely way more timing that I'm thinking of, and I think probably way more power than I gave him credit for. He flatlined him and then guillotined him. And, whew, it's great. It's great. He is going places. I'm excited to see it. This was a big step up from what he had previously beaten, and he passed it with flying colors. Because, you're moving from Jamie Malarkey to Brad Riddle. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. I need to go rewatch that fight he had with Matt Frivola, because the idea that he lost to Frivola is actually still kind of mind-boggling to me a little bit. So hang on. We're gonna do some live matchmaking here. What I think should happen. Let's see here. I pull out the Tapology rankings. Where is Jalen Turner? I must have missed him. There's no way he's this low. Okay. Let's just do the Control F. Is probably the best one. Okay. They have him at 15. Probably a little bit low. Especially considering they have him below Riddell. I don't know. Maybe they haven't updated it yet. Hey, he's right there with Demir Ismagulov. I'm not opposed. That could be fun. For Brad Riddle, he's lost 2 in a row. I want a fun, probably winnable fight for him. It's probably gonna have to be a little bit down on the list here. Who do we have? There's no one here that I'm really getting a strong feeling about here, if I'm being honest. Matt Frivola, maybe? The aforementioned Matt Frivola. Or, Ricky Glenn. Ricky Glenn does not have a dance partner right now. That's got me all kinds of titillated. So let's do that. And then, I don't have much more to say about that fight. Donald Cerrone retired after getting guillotined by Jim Miller. It wasn't a sad fight. There was some grappling. There was some decent striking exchanges. Cerrone got to go out looking still fairly reasonable. Miller gets a big win. Kind of a perfect moment. I think Cerrone was hoping to go out on a win. That's, I think, something he's been saying for a while. But he went out there. He still looked reasonable, but he also lost to a guy that he had, beaten fairly soundly before. So I don't know. Not much to say about the fight. Jim Miller moves on. He'll do some things. Cerrone retires. I don't really care who Miller fights. Miller's at that point, kind of like Robbie Lawler. He kind of exists outside of the system, of the structure, because of his age and his time in the sport. Became the all-time win leader, I think, in the UFC off of this win, which kind of also incredibly fitting that he did it against Cerrone. So, I just really like the whole situation. Ian Gary, Gabe Green. Ian Gary looked, I don't want to say good, because the problem with judging an Ian Gary fight is that I feel like he's winning. I feel like there's promise there. I feel like there's good technique. There's good physicality. There's all the building blocks you'd be looking for in a fighter. But there's also this kind of Conor McGregor 2.0, poor man's Conor McGregor gimmick going on, and a a lot of hype and a lot of people talking about him as like a future champion. And the thing is that I don't see any of that. I see a guy who can be in the UFC for a long time. I see a guy who can get a ranking. I see a guy who can beat a lot of people. But I don't see it. And like that's kind of the thing is like after every fight, there's like this segment of the Gary army that is like, did you see that? He's going to top. And I'm like, I feel like you watched a different fight than me. Like I think he handled business here. He did a great job. What were the numbers here? 116 to 90. I think that's actually a little bit closer than I think it would be. You know, he knocked Green down. Like it's a good performance, but it's not a performance that leads me to believe that he is destined for like what people are pushing for him for. And like I don't know, it kind of ruins the fights for me a little bit because I'm looking for this X factor specialty that like people are seeing, and I'm just not seeing it. I'm just not. Maybe it's just like the cringe factor that just has me completely out of it. I threw up the idea of him fighting Mooney or Lazez next. Be interesting. Another guy who plays a similar kind of range striking game, who has been doing good things and probably actually does have a little bit more lethality, a little bit more threat. I think that would be a fun fight. Although now that I think about it, is Lazez the same gym as him? Because I know Gary is at Killcliff FC, as it is now known. Is that Sanford? Oh God, why does that gym keep changing names? The whole like sponsorship bullshit with them is kind of annoying. It's dumb. I get the financial arrangement, but it's dumb. Where does Lazez train out of? Amir Lazez. No, okay, he's Team Nogueira Dubai. Why was I thinking he was Sanford? Okay, yeah, no, that's a winner. Do that fight. For Gabe Green, he's just kind of filler. So, like, you know, any kind of action fight would be fun with him. Like, he's a fun fighter, but it was kind of like coming into this fight. It's like, you know, he's a guy that, like, someone of a real prospect level should probably cruise by. And at times, I think that was happening. But at times, not really. Dricus Duplessis versus Brad Tavares. All right, round one went largely like I thought it would. Tavares has a well-schooled, well-honed, not super exciting, kind of boring kickboxing style that kind of neutralizes people and does the thing. And he was doing that to Duplessis, who I've always said, Duplessis I watch fight and I'm like, I don't understand how you exist as a fighter. I don't understand how you got this deep into your career, got to the UFC fighting like this, because I get it. There's a lot of physicality to him. He is explosive. He is fast. He is powerful. But my Lord, does everything he do seem janky as all shit. And like Tavares was finding that. He was hurting him. He was landing good stuff. When Duplessis tried to wrestle him, it was completely self-sacrificing lateral drops. Ended up with Tavares on top. Really good first round. And I'm like, all right, feeling good. This is what I thought the fight would be. This is why I picked Tavares. And then round 2 comes around, and round 3 comes around, and I don't know. Tavares seemed like he was the one to kind of gas out before Duplessis did, which is really concerning. And he started getting clipped with like some of the stuff that Duplessis does, and started getting hurt and kind of shut down. It's kind of disappointing because, you know, I've always said this, like I'm not a big believer. Like I never thought Brad Tavares like champion or super high level guy, but to see him just kind of fade out of this fight, kind of disappointing. On Duplessis' side, like, okay, man does everything with incredible inefficiency and somehow still can go hard for 15 minutes. Like, I'll give him that. That was impressive. But like at the same time, I think every like critique, every hang up I have about him, except for the cardio, is absolutely still in play. Uh I don't know. I don't know. He apparently got in Gastelum's face afterwards. So hey, do Kelvin Gastelum, I guess. And like for Brad Tavares, do you like Uriah Hall? We'll talk about in a bit. They're two of the older tough veterans still on the roster, I think. They're in that class with like Court McGee. I think Tavares is the longest standing tough guy on the roster. Like really on the roster. Like I know the answer is probably Nate Diaz from season 5. But Nate Diaz is not really on the roster. Like if we're being honest, the UFC is basically just holding him hostage while at the same time being like, yeah, no, you probably could go fight Jake Paul. It'll be a fine fight. It'll be fun. Just let us get our last fight in here where we like just completely get him steamrolled by somebody so that like, it doesn't give Jake Paul any legitimacy whatsoever, and it doesn't give Nate Diaz any legitimacy to go out there and do a boxing career. Which, and again, if you're honest about that, I'd be fine with that. But like but like Dana White like has this tendency to be like, yeah, it's a thing that could happen, as if he's not literally the only thing stopping it from happening. Anyways, off the Dana White, back to this fight. Well, not really much more to say about the fight. Duplessis moves on and has had a surprising UFC career and does keep winning. And I guess I'm looking forward to being flabbergasted by some more. I guess that's what it comes down to. Andre Muniz just kind of grappling dummy Uriah Hall for most of their fight and got the job done and shut Hall down and took a 30-27. And the only thing I really have to add about it is, am I the only one that actually thinks that like Muniz, if he like just focused on more like traditional, quote unquote, boring grappling, might actually be a more effective fighter? Because he's the only guy you're ever going to see who like sits on people's backs, and the rear naked choke is not an option for him. Like he's looking to exclusively armbar from that spot as opposed to work in a rear naked choke. It's kind of weird. Kind of weird. It feels like a lot of like style over substance a little bit. I mean, it's good. Like man submitted Jacare. Like who am I to really critique it? But I'm just saying, in general, I don't know. It feels very, very bizarre that he's like that. And for next opponent, I have the winner of GM3 versus Bruno Silva on the line because they're both good grapplers. They're both predominantly grapplers, although Bruno Silva has been more keen to strike in recent times. And that would be the test, because the last little bit we've had with Muniz is he's been fighting guys who are predominantly strikers, but who don't have like a deep stay away game. Like Uriah Hall, dynamic striker and everything, but like a guy who can be shut down. Eric Anders is a guy who is a striker who will just bowl into stuff. Yes, he beat Souza before that and Bartosz Fabinski, but like Jacare, a bit of age. Fabinski, kind of never really a great grappler, just kind of a blanket. And then of course, the Antonio Arroyo fight isn't much. Like I kind of want to see how good this actually is. Like put him in there with someone who's been functional as both a striker and a grappler, which both GM3 and Silva have been, and see what happens. Kind of intrigued. We're at that point. Macy Barber had a really good performance against Jessica Eye. Jessica Eye retired afterwards. To a certain degree, though, like part of it, the problem is like Jessica Eye is someone who, if she was going to trouble Barber, was really going to have to do it from outside the clinch, but kept wanting to clinch, kept wanting to try to make this into a clinch fight that she just wasn't really winning, because like her clinch isn't overly technical. Her clinch is a bully clinch. It's a physical clinch. And Barber is a younger, probably more physical fighter. And that's why I'm thankful for this because it's why I picked Barber to win. I picked I to kind of do this and to go to her like safety net and have it not be a safety net, and it wasn't. And that's all to really say about it. Barber is looking better every time out. There's like a little bit more to her game or whatever, but she's still kind of winning fights because of other people's. In Montana De La Rosa's case, physical limitations. In Jessica Ai's case, fight IQ limitations. And then like the Miranda Maverick fight, which she lost. For next fight, I saw Jennifer Maia doesn't have a dance partner right now. Like Jennifer Maia would be kind of interesting. She's someone who is physically strong, is physically durable, is physically good at the clinch. But at the same time, it's not just a physical game. Like she's someone who, in the clinch with like Valentina Shevchenko, found answers despite not having physical advantages. So that would be the interesting one. Like the well of like, okay, you want to clinch. I kind of want to clinch. Your clinch is really physical, but my clinch is like perfected to really utilize what physical gifts I have and augment it with a lot of technique. And it's kind of a fascinating fight. It's a fascinating test. And apparently Barbara's out of a contract at this point, so I don't know. I have no doubt the UFC will resign her. I don't think that's something that we really need to talk about. She's young. They have made a great effort to push her in the past. Kind of didn't really work because she kind of fell down. But they definitely see her as a prospect and so on. And as long as she doesn't ask for ridiculous money in the UFC's thoughts, I don't see any reason why she wouldn't be resigned. And I retired, like I said. It's good. Kind of like Cerrone, going out on a loss, but like, a loss in which she didn't look helpless. She didn't look sad, didn't look broken down. She went out there and she, have a hard time saying what her career would be because like she got a title shot and everything. She did everything that there is really to do for her in MMA, except win a title. And the fact that she honestly kind of refused to, after a while, to really get any better and continue to display like pretty terrible fight IQ, meant she was never going to get a title. So, happy trails, have a good life, and I don't know, don't get busted with drugs. like that feels kind of like the biggest problem for her. Julia Stolarenko, 42-second armbar over Jessica Rose Clark. So I picked Jessica Rose Clark, and I was arguing with people who were very pro Stolarenko coming into this fight. And my thought was that Stolarenko is kind of like a poor person's Ronda Rousey. She's got a really good armbar. She's not unphysical, but she's not super physical. Doesn't have a great way of getting the fight to the ground. Doesn't have a particularly good stand-up game. It's a one-trick pony. It's a good trick when it's employed, but it should be something that most fighters can just avoid. I thought Jessica Rose Clark would do that. And then she goes out there, gets the armbar, whatever, and like people are like, so have you changed your mind on Julia Stolarenko now? Why? Saw her go out there and take down Jessica Rose Clark, who was incredibly cross-footed at the time of the takedown. Get an armbar, which I have, specifically said she's good at, and win. Like it's a win that saves her job. I think this is her first UFC win, actually. Am I mistaken on that? Let's see here. UFC record. Well, she won an Ultimate Fighter fight against Marcia Allen, but lost to Pani Kianzad on the Ultimate Fighter. Lost to Leah Letson on the Ultimate Fighter finale. Got cut, came back, lost to Yana Kunitskaya, Julia Avila, and Alexis Davis. So yeah, okay. So this is her first win. She saves her job on a 4-fight losing skid. But I mean, she won the fight by how she generally wins the fight. This was more about Jessica Rose Clark just getting her footwork wrong, getting taken down, getting armbarred, which we knew was possible because she just got armbarred by Stephanie Egger. Or Egger, pardon me. I don't know. Like, what am I supposed to take from this? That's like new and fixed and so on. Like, I don't fully understand. I didn't really get it. I don't really get what I'm supposed to like think is super awesome and changed. I guess that's kind of all I have to say about that. I don't overly care what's next for either girl. Jessica Rose Clark might get cut off of this. She probably shouldn't. Still, for women's bantamweight, she's still good enough to fight in the UFC, and she's still good enough to beat some people on the roster, but she has had 2 pretty bad fights. The Egger fight is really annoying because she got out of a bad spot only to put herself right back in it, and then to lose the exact same way here, even if at least Stolyarenko had to impose the situation on her, whereas Egger didn't, is very disappointing. And for Stolyarenko, like I said, it hasn't changed my mind at all. You know, I feel like doing the who's the American conservative guy, the change my mind guy. Is that Crowder? It's Steven Crowder. I feel like kind of doing that. Julia Stolyarenko is still a one-trick armbar pony. Change my mind. I'm kind of until it does. I'm not actually that interested because it's not even like she's like an Andre Muniz one-trick pony. Like Andre Muniz's main way of winning fights is like mostly through just armbarring people, but like there's a really deep grappling game. There's actually a pretty good takedown game there. There's an aggressive striking game there that is technically flawed, but like leads into the grappling game and allows him to do things. Like Stolyarenko is the girl who just got clinched against the cage by Yana Kunitskaya at infinitum and couldn't do anything about it. She's still that same person to me right now. I don't know. She did look a little more in shape though, so like she's doing the right things. It seems like she's trying to get in better shape and you know she fought a good fight. It's just the limitations that were there before are still in play. That's all for today. So check out the podcast in its various forms. You're watching it right now, so kind of pointless. But check out the Discord for mixed martial arts simulated fun, as well as some other things. We have pro wrestling, we have slam ball on there as well. Follow me on Twitter and check out the Facebook page. That's really all I got to say. It was a good card. It was an interesting card. There was some perception shifted. There were some good fights. There were some things I'm going to go back and watch again and again and again and again. And there were some things that fans are like tremendously overreacting to. So I think it had kind of everything. Didn't have any judging controversies, I guess. That's the one thing that we were missing here. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the fights. And I'll see you next time.